Hi, John. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
And it's good to see you again because for the audience who don't know, I know John very well. I've been on a few of his Wildway Bushcraft courses. I've been on a few of his canoe expeditions. I thoroughly recommend them. And I'm really looking forward to what you have to share today. And I know the audience will too. For the audience who don't know you, what's your story?
Yeah. I my story. I served in the Royal Air Force for sort of 8 years. Left. Did a bit of bumbling around in Civvy Street trying to find my feet, and then for my sins, ended up in the army. um, and then got discharged. Basically, I was medically discharged through injury and bits and bobs like that. And then yeah, and then I just spent a little while messing around in the woods trying to figure out what I was going to do, and stumbled across the idea one day in the woods that I was going to start a bushcraft company, which is, bushcraft is one of my massive passions. So Wildway Bushcraft was conceived around a fire with a hip flask of whiskey and trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do after
so,
after leaving the big cuddle of the air of the military.
yeah, exactly. That sounds pretty good. I'm familiar with what bushcraft is, but for the audience who aren't, what is bushcraft? This will be the first time people have ever heard of this idea.
Yeah. Oh man, we could go down a rabbit hole and really upset, really upset loads of people on the internet. Bushcraft. To me, bushcraft is essentially a set of outdoor skills, utilizing what nature and wilderness areas gives you to enhance your time in the outdoors. So it encompasses things like foraging for food or for natural resources to make containers, make string, make pots to cook in. It involves utilizing different types of wood to create fire by friction, rubbing sticks together. Um, it's it's just about engaging with nature, engaging with the wild, engaging with outdoor space, um, and enhancing your ability to be out there. Essentially, completely opposite to survival, where survival, it's all gone horribly wrong. We need to get out of Dodge. We need to get rescued. Let's do everything we can in our means. Drink our own piss. Like turn into cannibals. Get back to civilization. Whereas
Yeah.
bushcraft is like, we're going out for a journey. We want to be out there. We don't want to carry loads of kit. We want to be there. We want to
Mm.
experience it and all that sort of stuff. So that's that's the
S-
difference.
Yeah. So you've touched on something there. I just want to explore just a little bit before we dive into the question. So, uh, even though I've been on a few of your courses and your canoe expeds, I'm still relatively new to this area. And for my sins, I probably lumped bushcraft and Ray Mears and Bear Grylls all together. Now,
Yeah.
I imagine there is some sort of crossover a little bit, but they seem very much what you just said there, like the survival side of things.
Yeah.
And bushcraft seems to be this, I like what you said. It enhances your time outdoors. You can grow an appreciation for nature and enjoy your time in the outdoors and being present, and enjoying,
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
woods or whatever. So is that, would I be correct in saying that it's not quite black and white, it's quite nuanced?
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely. It's like most things in life. There's this grey area. Yeah. The whole how I explain it to people that have never heard of it is sort of, you can take your Ray Mears, your character, and at the end of his episode, he's sat in front of a massive log table that he's built with candles and eating a massive smoked trout that he's caught, all with
mhm.
with natural material. Or you can take the Bear Grylls route, and I'm not getting into slagging off different celebrities. And, I've got no issues with Bear Grylls. Or you can give yourself a salt water and turtle guts enema while you're out at sea waiting to get
Yeah,
rescued. It's
yeah,
They're the two completely different mindsets.
yeah.
Um,
That's
two
all
sides
very.
of the same sort of coin, I imagine. That's probably the
All
best
right,
thing.
okay.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's quite interesting because I never viewed it as that way. I just quite ignorant in my own way, lumped it all together. But I'm really glad you clarified that. At least I've got something from this interview today.
Oh,
That's for
that's
sure.
good.
So back to your story, and not even just your story, the story of Wildway Bushcraft. Like, where did this love for bushcraft and the outdoors come from, and
Oh man.
how did it materialize? You explained briefly the how it was inspired and the idea that it came about around a campfire with hip flask of whiskey, but what sparked that love for bushcraft, and how did Wildway Bushcraft come about because of that?
Oh man, yeah. Well, I grew up in a military family, but I grew up around the edge of like Sherwood Forest.
Hmm.
So I used to love being out in the woods, out in the sort of, it's not wild. You don't get many wild places in the UK these days, but out in the woods, making dens and just exploring stuff as a kid, setting little traps that were never ever going to work, and and then as I sort of grew up, I became really interested in sort of indigenous cultures like Native Americans and the Sami of Finland, of northern Lapland, and all that sort of stuff. And it just sort of grew, and it was, I went down the rabbit hole of thinking it was, like survival, and then suddenly experienced this massive subject, and I was a bit sort of mind blown by it, and I wanted to know as much as I could. Even growing up, and then I joined the military, and thought, well, that'll be good. That I'll be able to sit around campfires and relax and go on expeditions. Actually, didn't do any of it. But in the background, I was always reading, always learning, going on little courses here and there. But I kept it sort of on the quiet, really, because you get classed as a bit of a weirdo wanting to go out in the woods on your own. And then when I left the military, it was like, right, what am I going to do now? I've got a family to support. What can I do? And Wildway Bushcraft was like, I'm going to do what I love, and try and make it pay somehow.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just like one of them babushka dolls, those little dolls. It's like you take off the Russian
Yeah.
dolls, you take one out, and you're like, oh, there's some more information. You take it out, and then the next thing you know, you're too far in the center of the subject to ever come out of it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I got involved in bushcraft. Wildway itself was a means to an end. When I left the military, I didn't want to just fall into the trap of security or some job that I was not going to engage me.
Hmm.
And because of the reasons I left the military, through post-traumatic stress and getting injured and all that sort of stuff, I didn't want to work for anyone else.
Yeah.
So the woods for me was a calming place. It was almost therapeutic at the time. So I was like, well, I need to work, so let's work in the woodland and let's
Hmm.
do the things I want to do, and hopefully I can blag it that some people come out and pay me to be out there as well. And that's literally like how the company started. It started with me running a little fireline session for a couple of mates, and then
Yeah.
went on to something else and went on to something else. And in fact, the very first canoeing expedition you came on, Johnny, it was like literally, I want to go canoeing in Scotland. How can I incorporate this into a business? Surely there'll be people that want to do it out there. Let's figure it out. And that first Great Glen trip, it was just like, I wanted to go canoeing. I was going to take some people with me, try and figure it out. So yeah, so that's the story of Wildway. It's
Yeah.
it was
That's
therapy, plus the need for some income, plus the need for peace, really.
yeah. Yeah. I think you touched on something there which is essential in my mind to starting a business, and I can certainly relate to it in my own here. And you said that it was something that you were passionate about. How can you do something that you're passionate about and still get
Yeah,
paid? And you know, I myself, eventually, my long term goal would be to certainly get quite proficient at bushcraft. but in the short term, this podcast would be my priority. But
Yeah.
I love having conversations. I love, meeting new people, discussing new subjects, discussing new ideas, and going over old ones. Like I know a little bit about bushcraft, but nowhere near as much as I'd like. But you've touched on something there that if you have any inkling to start your own business, there's no point starting something which is going to drain you. You need to
Oh
do
yeah.
something that's, as you say, it's therapy for you, it's calming, and it's something you're very knowledgeable in and passionate about. Um, I can't say the same for podcasting at the minute because I'm very, very new, but I'm very passionate about it and I'm willing to make this work.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, if you are thinking of starting any business, yeah, make sure it's something you're passionate about, because when the punches come, you're going to have to roll with them, and you're going to have to go, well, why did I start this in the first place?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, for
um
sure.
so potentially already answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Why an outdoors business in this particular area of the market? Because bushcraft is
Yeah.
incredibly niche. That is like ultra niche, I'd almost say. When the outdoors business, you could have gone for anything, and I would argue safer options.
Yeah, yeah.
Why this ultra niche part of the market?
Because I'm a sadistic and wanted to punish myself. No, it's well, I'd you know what, man? I'd been doing a bit of part-time work as a your sort of traditional outdoor instructor, taking people canoeing, kayaking, paddleboarding, all
Mhm.
that sort of stuff. Um, and none of it, all as great as it was, and as sort of like coast steering. I used to take people out coast steering a lot, which is jumping off cliffs and swimming through caves and
Mhm.
exploring coastline. As high adrenaline as it was, it never really got me excited.
Mhm.
It was just like, oh, I've got to take another group coast steering, or I've got to take another group kayaking. Um, so there was a gap in the market essentially in Dorset where there was no full time that I could find. There was no full time bushcraft company that was trying to address the gap in the market with adults. There was
Mhm.
lots of companies doing like children, sit around a fire, roast marshmallows, make some dens in the woods that
Mhm.
almost childcare bushcraft, entertaining kids for a little while. But there was nothing properly sort of, I don't like to use the word serious because I don't take myself very seriously at all. But there's there was nothing trying to hit that educational base of actually improving people's skills.
Mhm.
Um, so there was a little bit of a hole there, and I was just fortunate enough that I I'd set my mind to it that this was bushcraft and I wasn't going to do anything unless I enjoyed it. And I figured that, you know what, yeah, it is niche, but that allowed me to zoom all my effort and focus onto one target as opposed to spreading myself too thin, if that
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So is what I wanted to do, man. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's what I wanted to do. So we just cracked it.
Yeah. You've touched on something there, that a problem certainly I faced when I started my podcast, and that was, a lot of people said you can't be generic, which makes sense. You have to be ultra niche, but excuse me, with my subject matter being educating young adults, and if you're an older listener, I'm glad you're here. But it's just my target market is the 18 to 21, 24 age group, that
Yeah,
leaving school and leaving university, of of groups of people that leave these institutions, which they're all very good, but they don't equip us fully
yeah,
for the challenges you're likely to face in adulthood. And I certainly could have picked one very niche area to target, but there are so many things we don't know, like everything from, finances to how to change a car tire to just generic life advice, how to cook.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so yeah, it's like, so there's so many topics to discover, and as this podcast evolves, I'll see where the audience wants me to take it and listen to feedback and say, well, no, actually covering lots of subjects is very good, or no, just focus on this one niche. This is really needed right now.
Yeah.
So my podcast could change radically, or people could love the fact that I've not gone for a niche, but we'll wait and see. But clearly, you have spotted a niche and exploited it and had massive success with it. So fair play to you on that one.
Cheers, man. Yeah.
So I think you may have already started to answer the next question, which is great because it leads in nicely to it. In that, like, how did you recognize that demand in the market for your skills? I know
Yeah.
you discovered the niche and partly answered it, but it's still a good question, I think, because a lot of people think, what skills can I bring to market? And I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm only this, I'm only that I'm not that valuable in what I can bring professionally. But
Yeah.
like, I imagine you said that at one point. Well, I can just start a fire with sticks. I can forage. I can do this. Why would people want to pay to come and learn how to do this? But you had that faith. You
Yeah.
had that faith in yourself and your knowledge. So
Yeah. I still ask that question now. Why? Why? Sometimes on a cold, windy day and it's chucking it down with rain, I've got 10 people in front of me thinking, why have you paid to be it? It's like, yeah, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. Yeah, man. How did it? Well, I went on lots of courses myself. You know, throughout my sort of time. I'm 38 now. And without sounding too sort of big-headed or too much like a sort of a knob about things, I looked at some of the instructors and thought, you know, I could do this better.
Yeah.
And there was no one around in my area. Like I said, I mean, there's a very good specialist that runs a coastal survival company, but there was no one in the sort of in my area with the Dorset, Hampshire border, New Forest that, you know, was really focusing in on things. So I don't. It all seems to, you know, I don't ever think I had a master plan. I just think that I just fell into it. I mean, I set the company up and put everything in place, and I didn't even have a woodland to use. So I invested all the money in everything, in all the equipment and the training and the, you know, all that sort of stuff. I didn't actually have anywhere to do it. It was only through when a military charity called Supporting Wounded Veterans hooked me up with a wonderful lady called Elizabeth Van Geest, who basically owns some woodland in the New Forest, and said, yeah, you can use it. And that was sort of 5 years ago, and we're still there. So I guess it was tiptoe steps. You know, somebody asked me to teach them how to light a fire. I did it, and then a week later, somebody said, "Oh, can you teach me how to make string out of stinging nettles?" And it was all really small stuff, and it just sort of grew naturally. So part of it luck, part of it accident, part of it bit of hard work, but it would be hard. I think I find it difficult to split into percentage points, which was hard work and what was luck. But there's definitely a gap in the market for there was at the time, there probably still is, for accredited courses. That was always the master plan, was to get our courses accredited with a sort of a college or something like that, so we could actually give out qualifications, because that's something that a lot of schools don't actually do. So we thought, you know, that would be our unique selling point, as it were, USP, that business people bang on about all the time, which I don't even think they know what it is, to be fair. It's one of those buzzwords people buzz about. So it was, you know, that was always the master plan, the big goal: accredited courses, accredited expeditions, giving people qualifications. And then it was little baby steps trying to get there. But it was very organic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And I think the key thing that I've took away from that, and hopefully the audience can take away from that, is that you took messy action. Like, just do something. Like, I love the fact that you you know, even though you were like super qualified to do all these things, you know, it's the fact that you didn't like throw yourself completely at it. There was a bit of luck. There was a bit of, you know, things outside of your control that worked for in your favor and
Yeah.
against you, but you still persevered. And like you said, it was the baby steps, and now you're a full sprint with a successful business and a very unique place in the market. So
Yeah. Yeah. Messy action, man. I love that. That's an awesome phrase. Yeah. It's yeah, I tried to not make everything perfect. So I didn't want like perfection to get in the way of progress, if that makes sense. So I didn't, you know, um, yeah. So it's probably a better way of saying it is messy
yeah,
action, just little
yeah,
steps doing something. I read a book, I can't remember who wrote it now, but it's basically saying if you wait till everything is perfect in business to release it, you've released it 5 years too late.
yeah,
Which kind of made sense. And also, a bit of advice I was given by a good friend was people don't know what you don't know. If that makes sense.
yeah. I've heard
So
that one. Yeah.
yeah, it's like no one you don't know whether I'm making all this up. So like from a business point of view, if it if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, chances are it's a duck. Or my military one I always refer back to is sort of if it looks good and it smells good, it probably is good.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of tried to do with the business growth.
Yeah.
I never made anything up teaching, by the way, just to get out there. But yeah, becoming a I don't know, businessman or whatever you want to call it, took a lot of acting like a businessman, but deep
Yeah.
down I was completely out of my depth, basically.
Yeah. But I like what you literally just said there, that you were out of your depth. And I think, you know, and I'll be totally honest with my audience, starting this podcast, 100% out of my depth.
Yeah,
I would like to say I'm swimming and not treading water because I'm working hard to make it work.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's bloody hard work. And I've had my own fair share of luck and things come against me. I mean, like, for the audience who you don't know, when me and John were on before this interview, John's the first interview I've had where I've had probably no technical hiccups. So, you know, I'm about 5 or 6 interviews in, and it's the first time I've not had a technical hiccup. So
yeah.
you do have
That's
to keep
cool.
punching through that. Another good analogy I've always heard is with the car industry, and I hope I'm not going to butcher the quote too much, is that, you know, there's the constant argument between designers and engineers of a car, and if the engineers had their way, the car would never leave the factory. You know.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
one. I like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Um, so you briefly touched on that you had to act like a businessman and that you had to, you know, you didn't know what you know, but all of this comes into play in what makes a successful business, and it's the person running it. But what attributes or qualities do you need to run a business?
Um, oh, without sounding like a cliche, man, you've got to be self-motivated and
Yeah,
determined. You do take a lot of setbacks.
yeah,
You've just got to be able to sort of keep pushing forward. Um, I'm so bad at the office stuff.
yeah,
But you need to be able to motivate yourself to, when there's, especially working from home, there's a lovely sofa there with a TV and a kettle I can sit and, sit and eat biscuits and drink tea all day. But I quite like that now. The fact that if I don't do it, it doesn't get done.
yeah,
Um, you've got to, you've got to be motivated. You've got to have some sort of end goal, something to work towards. Even if it's, I'm gonna send out 10 emails today. Just
yeah,
little goals, little baby steps, and be passionate about what you do. If you don't get excited about it and you're not passionate about it, then I can't see how a business would ever work.
yeah,
Um, you know, whatever business, be it, well, yeah, designing cars or any entrepreneur, if you're not passionate about what it is, um, it's not gonna work. It needs to be more than the money you make, which is obviously a driving factor, but it's so much more than that. You know,
yeah. A good thing that I've been taught recently, and I wish I'd learned it a lot earlier, was starting off with a good quote is that motivation is like deodorant. By the end of the day, it runs out,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
wears off by the end of the day.
yeah,
And what you need to do instead is establish habits. And that's something I found. I found there are days I really, really just did not want to start a podcast. But
yeah,
I set myself that goal. I was like, this is like, there's days I was working 6, 7 hours a day to get this podcast up and running, and it's
yeah.
hard graft. Um, and like it was the fact that I had established habits. Like I had set myself a goal that I would spend at least an hour a day working on the podcast.
Yeah,
So even on my worst performing days, I still got an hour's worth of work done,
exactly.
regardless whether I felt like it or not.
Yeah,
So, establish habits and don't rely on motivation. It is good to have, but don't rely on it as the foundation of your work ethic, so to speak.
yeah. I found that I started to keep a journal. For some advice from another friend, a guy called David O'Mahony. That he's another injured veteran.
Yeah.
Uh, Not through any like sexy, bombing or shooting. He got hit by a taxi in London. So not every injured veteran has got some sexy war story. Poor old David, and he's a good friend of mine, and he's a motivational speaker now. But
Oh wow.
he was the one that was like, in fact, it'd be probably pretty cool to talk to in
Oh,
the future
100%.
for yourself. I'll pass on his details. But journaling, writing down at the end of the day what went well, what went bad, what I was grateful for, and then first thing in the morning, getting up, planning the day. Right, I'm gonna smash out this. I'm gonna get this done. I'm gonna get that done. Um, and it allowed me 6 months down the line to look back through it and go, oh, actually, yeah, I've done quite a bit.
Yeah.
Actually, oh, I haven't done that because there's always one job that just keeps running and running,
Yeah.
and but it's actually, oh, I've done that. I set myself that goal and I'd hit it. I'd set myself that goal and oh look, I'd hit it. I'd hit it. That so that was all
Yeah.
good. So that really helped. And um, it's goal setting. It's goal setting, motivation. But it's also about acknowledging when you're having a bad day.
Yeah.
Um, be it everybody, mental health is such a big thing these days, what with all this lockdown stuff and COVID and all that. But from my personal point of view, if I'm having a bad day, um I acknowledge the fact that I'm having a bad day and just
Yeah.
accept it and move on. It's If I don't get stuff done, I don't beat myself up about it. So
Yeah.
it's always about being sort of self sympathetic, as it were, not beating yourself up, because running a company, running a business, no matter how big or small it is meant to be fun. It's meant to be enjoyable. Otherwise, what's the point? We're on this planet for a brief snot of time. Um, Might as well enjoy it, because
Yeah.
if not, what a waste, eh?
Yeah. Dropping the truth bombs there, John.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I know you're a bit of an astronomer. My wife got me a little telescope, and I looked at the moon for the first time the other day, and it was like, I can see mountains on the moon.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm sure if you've clicked on this podcast, you'll have already seen that the podcast artwork is like nebulous and stars. That wasn't an accident. So, and it's slight tangent, but I think you can't help but be curious when you look up at the stars. And I know certainly the first time I looked at the moon and then saw my first planets with my own telescope, it was awe-inspiring. And
yeah,
uh, the subject of mental health and that sort of thing, if you want something that's really good for mental health, strangely enough, I'd recommend astronomy. Because see, when you realize, you look up at the stars and you realize just how like small we are in this vast universe, and you go, you know what, my problems aren't so bad. And I for me personally, I always feel better after a night of stargazing and through the telescope, and it's great for me. But again, touching on mental health and coming back to the subject, I also journal, but as well, I really, really recommend journaling for everyone, especially for your mental health. But I have a book that was recommended to me by a good friend as well, but it's called The 6 Minute Diary. So I think people feel like journaling is like almost this epic feat. You have to sit down and
yeah,
I've done journaling of all types. I've done mind dumps. I've done, like I've filled in 4 or 5 pages of journaling. But what I like about this is that sometimes, especially setting up a podcast, I have very little time on my day. And over the course of 6 minutes, I can just write down the thoughts in my head, the goals, what I achieved today, and it's so good, especially just before bedtime, because we all know that you put your head down the pillow, and next thing you know, your mind runs all over
Yeah,
the place. Whereas
absolutely.
journaling just before bed, you're like, you know what? It actually it's a nice reset, and I just go to bed and I'm off.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like slight tangent, nothing to
slight
do with
tangent,
business. Slight, but you know what? It's all good. It's all part of the process.
yeah.
um, so that's the attributes, and I think now that for argument's sake, you now have the attributes in place to run a successful business. But what problems did you encounter starting a business from the
um,
ground up that caught you off guard, and how, and I suppose these attributes helped you with these particular problems?
yeah. Um, what caught me off guard? The amount of work, the amount of
Pre-
paperwork. It was like,
Preach.
what? It's like, what do you mean I've got to do this? Yeah, it was just the thing that shocked me was literally the amount of stuff that goes on in the background. You arrive, you know, if I take a weekend course, it starts on a Friday at sort of 6 o'clock in the evening, and clients rock up, um, and they get taught the stuff, and they go home on Sunday. Um, that what you actually see as a client is always like 16 lessons, and they're all delivered, and you know everything's all fun and games. It's the amount of stuff that goes on the week before that. You know, like constantly cleaning kit, constantly. The things that caught me out were, you know, faffing about with water. Water is the bane of my life. It's like jerry cans and repairs, and just the amount of stuff that it's like. It did make me chuckle, because bushcraft is about going out into the woods with, you know, a knife, a saw, an axe, so some very minimal kit, and being able to um to operate great, and you know, and thrive. Being a bushcraft instructor is so much kit. It's like all the kit. I've got a workshop full of kit. So that was a bit of a shock. Um, the other stuff that sort of took me off guard was other people's attitude to your company. So
All right.
I've
Okay.
got a very good team now.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not. I'd say it's not my team. We are a team. So I've got Jack, who's a sort of green woodworking specialist, who runs a company called Phasey Woodcraft, who carves spoons and beautiful ornate items. And I've got a guy called Craig, who runs his own company doing the Fresh Air Club, it's called. He works a lot within school and vulnerable children and all that sort of stuff. And we all come together to run. I run Wildway, but we all come together to teach. And it's taken me 6 or 7 years to find decent people that care the same about
Yeah.
your company as you do.
Yeah.
That was a bit of an eye opener. I assumed that everyone else would have the same work ethic as me,
Yeah.
um, and they don't. We've gone through quite a few instructors and stuff in the past. Not to say that we're like militant about it, but there is an acceptable standard, or an assumed standard, and it's one of those things that a lot of people think they're good at bushcraft, but not necessarily good at teaching it.
Right.
So you might be the best, you might be the best person in the world to make fire out of friction, but if you can't get that message across to other people, then you can't really teach it. So that was it. Was finding people that cared and that had the skill set. That was a bit of a shock to the system.
All right. Okay.
But other than that, there was no. I kind of went into it. I think the way to do it is kind of go in with an open mind, and then nothing really is a sort of shock. I haven't been blindsided by anything yet, touch wood. But that's not to say it won't happen. I'm sure it will do one day.
Yeah.
But yeah, the amount of work in the background, I think, was a bit of an eye opener. Let's put it that way. It was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely sympathize with that one. Like, in my own ignorance, I looked at podcasting and thought, okay, a little bit of work, but you know, it's not going to be too bad. And then you go,
Yeah.
holy crap, like acquiring the equipment, figuring out the equipment, and then suddenly you realize, okay, I need to go onto a podcast hosting service. Oh wow, there's 5 or 6. Which one's the best one for me? And then just sourcing guests, like,
Yeah.
yeah, like trying to get guests. I've been very fortunate that 95% of the guests I've asked to come on have said yes, and I only had one problem where I asked a guest to come on, and they said yes, and then like 3 or 4 days before they went, no, actually we can't. I'm not interested. So I then had to jiggle my content calendar about, but that's no big deal. I expected this kind of thing, but like, yeah, I have a brand new respect for all YouTubers, podcasters, anything online. Like, in
Yeah.
my own ignorance, I was like, wow, I never knew like this much work went into sitting down in front of a screen and just chatting.
Yeah,
And then
man.
even when we finish here, I've got to do post editing, and then I've got to upload. Um, I mean, like, I am enjoying it. Like, I wouldn't be doing it otherwise. But like, wow, yeah, I can. The background work is something else.
Yeah, the internet, that was a thing I never factored in, actually. I never I never factored in. I just would naively assume that, you bang a website up and there you go, people come. But the amount of search engine optimization you've got to do,
Yeah,
and I know I've got to do it all myself because I've a a very close friend who happens to be a professional photographer and web developer who hosts the website. Um, but I've got to, uploading articles and then optimizing them and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of the time, I'm thinking I work in IT. I spend more time in front of the computer than I do in the woods. But and then in this world of social media, and it's always bringing out content, just
yeah,
content,
yeah,
and trying to post every day on social media and trying to record videos and just basically keep your face out there,
yeah,
because it's a quagmire, man, as you probably know through researching all your podcast stuff. There's so many people out there that are sort of fighting for attention on the internet. That was a big thing, the amount of time I'd be spent in this office, um banging my head against a computer screen.
yeah, yeah. That's something that so it's the statistic that I discussed with you prior to this interview was that, like, after 2 years only 6% of podcasts are still around, which is a
Yeah.
very sobering statistic. For my listeners, you'll be either glad or horrified to know that I'll be going on for 2 years regardless of downloads, regardless of what the numbers say. This is going for a minimum of 2 years. That's the goal I've set for myself, and hopefully it's a massive success. That's why I'm hoping for. So this is going to be at least a 2 year journey. If you're interested or horrified by that, tough luck.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's a difference right there, is that the those podcasts that have fallen by the wayside, or those companies that they say, what is it, a new startup these days won't be around in 3 years' time.
mhm,
um that, yes, there'll be bad luck, yes, there'll be, things out of your control, but a lot of it is making it work, is just that downright stubbornness and dogged determination, sometimes not accepting the truth that's in front of your own eyes and just blagging on through it.
yeah.
And I think that attitude for me certainly came from the military. Yes, the Royal Air Force is the military, before anyone starts out there going, it is.
You beat me
I,
to
I get a lot of grief from being in the Air Force. Um,
it.
but yeah, I mean, it's dogged determination, and it's almost, you've got to be thick-skinned, because
Yeah.
the certainly, like, YouTube's a horrible place to be. No, the comments on YouTube, so much vitriol and venom. Like, mate,
Yeah.
give me a break. Or just,
Yeah.
um, I feel sorry, because people quit because of what other people say. So, slightly off on a tangent, but I'm sure, Johnny, you'll
Yeah.
be here in 2 years' time,
Yeah.
just through thick-skinnedness.
Oh yeah. Just right. But you touched on something there that I'm not even sure if I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode. In fact, no, I did. I didn't mention it on my podcast. I was a guest on someone else's, which actually, now that I think about it, it's getting released today. So yeah, you can look forward to that. But we were discussing my podcast startup, and I said that this is particular to podcasting, but like people are going to give you grief regardless. Like if you start a business, people are going to give you grief. If you don't start a business, people will be like, "Hey, you not got the minerals to do it." You know, there will
Yeah.
always be someone on either side of that fence who is going to like give you shit. And what I realized, and what everyone needs to realize, quite frankly, is that the only opinions that matter are the ones that are held by the people who have your best interests at heart. So that, the difference being that if my brothers came to me or a good friend came to me and said, "Look, I think you're doing something great, but I honestly feel that this could be done better." I know that's coming from a place of friendship and of concern. It's like, okay, well, fair enough. Like this, there's rapport here. There's, these people genuinely want me to succeed. Their end goal to see me succeed.
Yeah.
Whereas Dave off the internet, he just goes, "This is fucking terrible." I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, cheers, Dave.
Yeah.
Why?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cheers.
Cheers, Dave.
Great contribution, Dave. Cheers. Um, if I think if we all realize that suddenly you don't give a toss what some random dude down the road has to say, but when like all of my inner circle are 100% behind me. And certainly some people have said, tweak it here, tweak it there, but overall you're doing great. Keep going. Don't stop. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. This is like surrounding you with your own tribe of people who will hold you to account, but at the same time, encourage you on your bad days, encourage you on your good days to go out and achieve that goal, which in
Yeah.
this case is starting a business.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm my own worst critic when it comes to anything, to
Yeah.
carving, to filming YouTube videos and stuff like that. And like you say, having those opinions that you can rely on is really important. Um, I always just have a slight. Your family might be a little bit more sort of honest than mine, but I don't want to take advice. I don't want to be, I'm very cautious of the fact that I probably don't take their advice
Yeah.
as they intend it. I even look for faults in it. I don't want to be the person that stood up on the X Factor that can't sing.
Yeah.
Even though my family's told me that I can sing. It's just like, so sometimes getting what am I trying to, the word I'm trying to use, impartial
Yeah.
advice or feedback has worked really well for me.
Yeah.
Someone with no vested interest and gone yay or nay. I mean, you don't have to action on it, but it sometimes gives you a more
Yeah.
honest opinion.
I think what you've just said there is really important in that there's a balance, isn't there? And,
Absolutely.
and I think that example, you don't want to be that person who goes on national television on the X Factor and can't sing.
Yeah.
It's like, even though all your family have said so, I think it's finding that balance between finding your core group of supporters who'll, give you that push that you need and and that encouragement, but also exactly what you said, the impartial, yeah, I liked it for this reasons, but disliked it for that.
Yeah.
I'm quite lucky in that my brothers can be very blunt, and that's a good thing.
Yeah,
They'll
man,
be
there's nothing wrong with being blunt. Blunt is
yeah,
beautiful.
but
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
all for bluntness, man. Anyone that sort of spends any time around me behind the scenes will know I can be brutally blunt. But yeah, this is trying to avoid the bullshit, but also knowing in your heart of hearts and having that confidence to go, I've received all the feedback, be it good, bad, I've received it, but this is what I feel is the most sort of true to me, so that I'm going to do it. It's taking on that feedback and acknowledging it,
yeah,
and but then you're the one that's got to make decisions. I mean, I've got a friend, I won't mention his name because he'll be on the phone straight away, but he is he is in an eternal feedback loop of, he will try and do something, and he will take feedback from someone and they'll say something, so he'll tweak it, then he'll take feedback that counteracts that feedback, and the next thing you know, he's made no progress because he's just spinning on the spot taking feedback.
yeah,
So at some point you've got to grab it by the balls and go, right, thanks for your feedback, but I'm going to implement this. Thanks for your feedback, but I'm not going to implement it. Bosh, and make the decision,
I like that.
and go with it, because I run Wildway on my gut. Very rarely do I give an idea or give a thought a couple of minutes, and if it doesn't feel right in my gut, if I don't have a good gut feeling about it straight away, I just don't do it. It's just like, no, I don't, no, I'm not doing it. And that seems to work. You know, I probably missed opportunities from not being intelligent enough to not listen to my gut. But at the end of the day, I think your gut feeling is normally right about stuff. You know, normally right. So that's that's the way I work.
You've done something right so far if you're running a successful business, so trust
Yeah.
That is not official business advice, by the way, audience. Trust your gut. Use your head as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. By rights, I shouldn't be here doing this.
But what you said, I want to touch on as well, in that, you know, taking all that advice and moving forward anyway, I found you know, podcasting very liberating, because suddenly, like, I have a vision for where I want my life to go, and I feel that podcasting would contribute to that greatly if done right. And the fact that I'm doing it, it's a very liberating feeling. It's a weird psychological freeing up, letting go of baggage. Like, it's very hard to articulate, but like when you are suddenly on a path that you're passionate about, and in your soul, in your bones, you go, yeah, I'm actually really enjoying this, and actually this aligns with my values and who I am as a person. Like, it's a weird, surreal feeling, and
it is, man.
It's I think that's when you find, I don't want to get all airy fairy perhaps, but you know, your purpose and and it's like, it's weird that we talked earlier about motivation and habits. I find there's very few days I have to rely purely on habit. The motivation's usually there to go, do you know what, I'm having fun doing this, you know.
Well, that's the word, man. That's the key word for me, is fun. You know, if you're enjoying doing something, you invest more in it. But like, from a personal standpoint, you know, if it's fun, you invest in it, and then people see you having fun and enjoying things, and that makes you more approachable to people. And then it's almost like a snowball, and it starts very small with just you, and the more you enjoy it, the bigger it gets, the bigger it gets. And you suck all these people in, and you know, you end up with a circle around you that all enjoy the same thing, which is what it's all about. It's all fun. No one's getting out of here alive. So fun is that word, man. Fun is that key word. If it's not fun, then you shouldn't certainly, well, I'll rephrase that. If it's not fun sort of 90% of the time, if there's more bad days than good, then my advice would be to sack it off. But you know, if it's not fun, question whether it's the right path for you. Do you know what I mean? That's what I would, don't you know?
Yeah, dropping the audio gold there. But one more. Oh, well, I have a couple of more questions for you, actually, and it's just triggered what you were, based on what you were saying there. We've just like talked quite in depth about all the various you know, maybe more abstract concepts around a business, but looking back now with a successful business and how far you've came, what would you do differently if you could do it all again?
I would, if I could do it differently and do it all again, I would do things a lot sooner than I have done.
Yeah.
I look back, and I've started and paused over decisions that or jobs that needed to be done. I would have gone for accreditation with the NCFE, who accreditate all our courses, a lot sooner. We were, you know, I had everything in place, but it was almost, and I still suffer with it now. It's like that fear of rejection or fear of failure. Yeah. I would have learned to bash through that wall a lot quicker. That was a big stumbling block, certainly in the sort of up to the last, not so much this year. You can pretty much scrap this year, can't you? It's been rubbish. But last year I was just cracking on with things. But the first 2 years, 3 years, you know, I would get to a point and I'd be like, oh, I'm not quite sure if I'm good enough. I'm not quite sure if I'm ready.
Yeah.
I've heard it described as imposter syndrome, where like, you know, you're not entirely sure you should be where you are. That's what I would do differently this time, is I'll just be a bit more aggressive with the growth. I've taken it very, very slowly, which has been nice because I've been able to go through every single process, but I could have developed it a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Which is probably what I would have done looking back.
Yeah. I actually have the same thing. I wish I had started sooner.
Yeah.
I'm glad I have started, but looking, I'm not like, what was I afraid of? Like,
Well, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, you already did touch on it, is that rejection or the fear of being made fun of, or people have, and then it goes back again to what I said. Well, the only opinions that matter are your core people of who have your best interests at heart, balanced
Absolutely.
with the impartiality of some others.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? I mean, I've funny you talked about imposter syndrome, because I just recently seen a part of a TED talk on imposter syndrome. I actually paused it about 2 or 3 minutes in because I actually had to do podcast stuff. But for the audience, you'll be glad to know there is a TED talk on imposter syndrome, and the first 2 or 3 minutes, I was very interested and hooked on it already, so I would definitely give that a look. I might even maybe provide a link for it in the show notes. So we've covered quite a lot today, and I think we may have already answered this last question, but what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Just get on with it. Just do it.
I love it.
It's just like, you've got to just grab it by the balls and go for it. As long as you've got a passion for it, and the motivation, I think, is more than money. Because if anyone out there is thinking about becoming a millionaire through bushcraft, I hate to drop it to you, but it's not going to happen, man. It's not going to happen. Yeah, just get on with it. Just grab it, go run with it, and
learn along the way.
Yeah, suck it and see, man. Suck it and see. Yeah, it'll be a meandering, crazy path. It won't be A to B, but it'll be a good journey along the way. Yeah, just do it. Just don't be afraid, and just get on with it. Because it is never as bad as you make it out in your head. Or certainly, it's never as bad as you build it up. Like,
what was it Seneca said? We suffer more in imagination than we do in reality.
Yeah. It's and that's it. And even now, like, I would, don't turn stuff down if it feels good. Just, even if you don't know how to do it, just say yes and figure it out along the way. I think it was Richard Branson that said something like, "Oh, you'll just say yeah and then figure it out." I'm not saying that's great advice, but so just do it. Just do stuff.
Yeah.
Just do something every day that is towards a goal, and eventually you'll find yourself on one of your podcasts, Johnny.
There you go. That's a success if you get on the Curious Ulsterman podcast.
That's it.
So yeah, I think take messy action, folks. Even if it's 30 minutes a day. Before we do conclude the interview, something I do want to have a chat about is your book, and for the YouTube audience, it's Bushcraft, a Family Guide. Tell us a little bit about this book, because bushcraft, I think for a lot of people see it as this thing that maybe, you go off by yourself to do, or it's not something that's family friendly. And what's your take on that? Explain the book as well.
Yeah, man. So the book came about through an opportunity, meeting the right person at the right time. But I'd recently had, me and my wife had recently had my son, and there, I felt there was a bit of a gap in literature. There was very, very good books on sort of, your serious stuff, your books that Ray Mears produces, and the likes of Lars Folt and all that sort of stuff, for your very serious expedition stuff. And then there was some like very 101 things you can do with a stick, which was quite like, forest schooly stuff. But what I wanted to do was give parents the confidence to take their own children out and do stuff with their own kids, because I was taking other people's children out with my son, and it was like, well, you could do this. It was like, well, I don't know how. It's dead easy. Read the book. It's not a problem. So that came about with that. And it was something that was put in front of me. Do you want to write a book? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And then thought, I can't write. I only told my wife I'm going to write a book. She's like, your spelling's atrocious. Are you possibly going to do this? But it came about as a passion for the outdoors and trying to get people to get their kids outdoors, essentially, within the bushcraft sort of world. But it's trying to get people to, I mean, we could do another whole couple of hours on humans' relationship with the outdoors or nature, but it was, the more people care about nature, the more people they have a vested interest in it, the more they protect it. But the way to get them to have a vested interest in it is to engage them with it and to realize what all the possibilities are, so they actually care about it, as opposed to just, we're going to clear fell 1,000 acres of woodland. Why would I care? Because I don't have it. It's a weird, strange place. So the book was an opportunity to try and address that a little bit, but also give parents fundamentally a reason and an excuse and a little bit of confidence to get outdoors with their kids. Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, it was a happy. I said, yeah, I can write a book, and then a year later, I've got a publisher going, about this book that you said you'd write, which is why I dragged Owen in. He's a good friend of mine who runs an outdoor company, because I was like, this is a bit of my mammoth task. I'm going to drag him in and get him to do it with me. So yeah, that is the book. That is available in all good Amazons, I imagine.
Yeah. I really like that, because I was lucky enough that, I grew up in the early 90s, and we didn't have phones. Like, I think I got my first phone when I was like 12 or something. And I was lucky enough to grow up in the country as well, and my childhood was spent sword fights with sticks and exploring everywhere in dens. I was very lucky to have that. And I think I'm not gonna give grief to anybody. How you live your life is your life, each to their own. But I think everybody can benefit to getting a little bit more into the outdoors. I can see pretty much no downsides to spending more time in the outdoors and appreciating nature.
No.
I believe even in Scotland, actually, last year, that it actually became legal, or they allowed it, that a doctor could prescribe nature, like go for a walk.
What are we? What has the human race come for? When the doctors goes, you've got to go outside and engage with the natural world. Mate, it's honestly, we'll have to do another one on it. Because it's honestly, and it was that computer screen thing, and that. Yeah, man. We could open a rabbit hole and dive down it, but probably best
we'll definitely have you back on again. In fact, John will be back on again to discuss his life story in one of the Curious Ulsterman specials, so you can look forward to that. But I'd love to have you back on to discuss how do we engage more with the outdoors, and how do we appreciate the environment more, especially as my generation has become very, I want to say, ecologically aware, that this is our only home and we need to take care of it. And like, if we can do that by becoming more engaged with nature, so that when it does come on the news, so many thousands of acres of woodland have been felled, people go, this is outrageous, and we let people know that it's not acceptable, so to speak. But
absolutely,
I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, John. And for people who have now had a sparked interest into the world of bushcraft and various things, where can they find more of your content?
You can visit our website for all the Wildway Bushcrafty stuff at wildwaybushcraft.co.uk. There's an Instagram which is regularly updated, which is if you just type in Wildway Bushcraft, I think it's at Wildway Bushcraft. It's nice and original. And then there's there's a Facebook page which is Wildway Bushcraft. But yeah, there's you can message me through there or contact me through Facebook or the website or whatever. But they're the main outlets: Instagram, Facebook. We do have a Twitter feed, but I tried to stay away from Twitter because it's full of nutters. But they're the main outlets of all your usual stuff.
Yeah. And if you fancy something different, I thoroughly recommend one of his bushcraft courses, even if it's a day or a weekend. And the canoe expeditions are pretty kick-ass. And when COVID resides or goes away, I'm looking forward to the next one, John.
Yeah, nice one, mate. It'd be good to have you back on the water. It'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Sure. Thank you very much for coming on today. I've gotten a lot of value from this, and I'm sure the audience will too. And look forward to having you back on the podcast again sometime soon.
No worries. Yeah, look forward to it. All right. Thanks.
All the best.